everybody. How are you? Thanks for coming today. I think we'll get started. So my name is Peter Bazeli. I'm the principal of Weitzman Real Estate Consultants based in New York City. We are the largest branded residential development advisor in North America, consulting on about 80 branded residential projects throughout North America, including Latin America and the Caribbean, somewhat in Europe, every year. And so we're working currently with all of the major hospitality flags, many of the luxury lifestyle flags. I see some of our partners in the audience right now. And we're very active not only in branded residential, but in hospitality development, mixed-use development, and of course, this world of branded residential has really exploded. A lot of what we do as a firm is not only the initial due diligence and feasibility work, but also then making sure that we're helping our clients avoid mistakes and make good decisions along the way. So that means that oftentimes we're involved in oversight of the sales and marketing strategy, pre-development, project management, putting to the teams together. So our role is pretty broad, and just because of the explosion in branded residential that we're all here to collaborate on today and yesterday, this has been a tremendous opportunity to understand other parts of the world and a variety of perspectives. So I'm joined by a fantastic panel here today. We have Jean-Baptiste Recher, who's the Regional Vice President of Development of Luxury Brands for Accor, for the Middle East, Africa, and Turkey. We have Mitra Ghamsari, who's the founder and CEO of Persepolis Investments, one of the largest and most active developers of branded residential in Spain. And we have Rosa Piro, who is Arada's senior business development director, focused very much on what's happening right here in terms of the growth in Dubai, but also in other markets where we've been discussing some of the great opportunities in places like Australia. So what I'd like to do is actually have you dive in a bit further on your background and what you're focused on in branded residential. And so Jean-Baptiste, maybe we can start with you.
Ladies first, I think.
Okay, fine. Mitra, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, hi. My name is Mitra Ghamsari. I come from New York City, actually American raised and educated, and I've been in Spain now for about 10 years. We've done 3 separate strategies, everything in the residential and hospitality space, and in branded residential, we currently have 3 standalone buildings in Madrid that we are actively working on as we speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rosa Piro. I'm Senior Director for Arada Developments. Arada has over 60 billion AED worth of projects in UAE and Australia, and we have 5 branded residency schemes, of which 2 are standalone in Dubai.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean-Baptiste Recher, Regional VP for Accor Luxury Brand, covering the Middle East, Africa, and Turkey, and working very closely with our residential team. This is gone. Okay, back. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. Rosa, I think we'll start with you because I think one of the projects that you're best known for here in Dubai is the Armani Residences project, which looks fantastic. I'd love to tour it next time I'm here. But one of the challenges in any market with standalone projects is oftentimes how to stand out. How do you stand out with a standalone? And in crowded markets, it's especially difficult because every brand might be there. There may be hotels that are associated with a hospitality brand that are already existing in the market. There may, in fact, be also branded residential associated with those hotels. And now perhaps you're thinking about developing a new standalone project in a market. So Dubai is a crowded market. Miami is a crowded market. I do a lot of work in Miami. And these days, of course, there really isn't a brand premium associated with a brand. It's kind of expected. You have to have a brand in the Miami market in order to just simply compete. And so then the question is, what more can you do incrementally to add value to the development proposition? So what have you found in your experience here in Dubai and how you're thinking about other projects in Australia and elsewhere to create that value, to pull that thread of sort of added value proposition for the buyers?
Sure. So it's for a developer, actually, standalone projects are excellent because our core is not being a hotel operator, it's a residential. So if we do a standalone projects, we stay close to our core, and the business model of a hotel operator is very different from a developer. A developer invests and gets the cash out within 2 to 3 years, while a hotel owner is more of a long-term game. So it's definitely appealing to opt for standalone branded residency scheme. With respect to crowded markets, so in the case of Dubai, it's crowded for brands, but it's also crowded for standard products. So in Dubai, for example, you have 15 launches. There have been 15 launches per month of apartments over the last 2 years, every month. So that's over 80,000 units. So for a company like Arada, which was a newcomer in the Emirate of Dubai, we're traditionally a Sharjah master plan developers, we decided we wanted to make a big statement with brands. And in fact, Armani Beach Residences, which is an incredible partnership with Armani Group, was something that enabled us to increase our brand recognition as a developer, but also be able to reach price premiums of 120% on the market average in the Palm. So that was something amazing. And then with respect to our second project, it actually enabled us to unlock very premium lands. So we purchased in Dubai Harbor, which is a premium master plan. We purchased in the IFC. And so that really helped us place Arada on the map in Dubai and unlock future potential opportunities. With respect to differentiation, I think it's quite easy to do it with a brand like Armani. It's their interior. There's a design brand, not a hotel brand. We have done it with W Residences in Dubai Harbor. And what we focus on is actually creating a very hospitality-focused experience in a residential project. So in the case of W, we have a full-fledged clubhouse. We have 3 rooms for guests to stay at when they're visiting the buyers. So you kind of try to create that hospitality experience nonetheless. And buyers really have attention to detail when it comes to making sure that the product that they purchase is service-oriented. Yeah.
You know, the Armani brand is really interesting to me, and they've had sort of a long track record. They're one of the few fashion brands that's been out there in the branded residential market for a long time. 20 Pine Street in Manhattan, the Miami projects, et cetera. You know, but they have a home furnishings line. There's a sort of a direct sort of connection between, you know, the brand and the lifestyle versus a car company, Aston Martin. You know, of course, there are enthusiasts that are fans of that brand, but Armani is an interesting choice, not a hospitality brand, but inherent in the brand is an element of hospitality. I think that you have an opportunity to market and sell. Mitra, I want to actually ask you about some of your experience in Spain, because brand selection is so important to standing out in a market. And you know, in Madrid, it's still an evolving market, and you've been capitalizing on that. But still, brand selection is very important. Perhaps you can speak a bit about your experience there.
I think the first thing to say is within Madrid, which is where we're principally focused, before we got involved, there was only the Four Seasons as a branded scheme, and it was not a standalone. It was kind of a residual piece of a hotel project that they had to do residential. So I think market timing and the brand that goes along with that market timing is fundamental. In the case of Madrid, right now we have the Four Seasons, we have the Mandarin, and we have our 3 projects. One of them is the SLS Madrid, which is kind of a bizarre brand, one could say, as the first, you know, one of the first brands to put in. But I think the key here in picking a brand, especially with, you know, with a very ripe market like Madrid, is finding the right brand that kind of goes with the market timing. Madrid's going through a transformation, so it's basically looking, you know, in terms of market timing, just like any investment, what are the neighborhoods that are evolving? What are the demographic changes that you're witnessing? And SLS, for instance, is one that's edgy enough that gets market interest and market lifestyle interest involved in that particular area. There have been buildings we've looked at, for instance, with the brand you just mentioned as well, where I think, you know, that neighborhood, it's a whole blend of factors to make the right investment between the demographics, the market timing, and the actual architecture of the building. I think it's very, very important to not just think of a brand as like a label that you're putting on something in order to get a return. It's really kind of like the whole partnership between the brand, the location, and the end buyer, which is what we're always thinking about when we're picking a brand.
And getting that message across during the sales and marketing process is so critical to achieving the types of premiums that every developer underwrites, but some don't always achieve. Sometimes, of course, the return on that is outsized, but you know, I think mitigating market risk is always a critical element to the strategy, whether it's a crowded market or whether it's an emerging market. You know, the challenge is, how do I actually achieve premium revenue potential here and establish new benchmarks in a market? that pay for, in fact, the higher cost side of building a branded residential development. And so I think I'd love to hear your perspective on this, Mitra, and then perhaps Jean-Baptiste, if you have some thoughts. To me, the key is always about painting a picture for a buyer in terms of the sustainable value proposition. How can you really tell that story to the buyer market and also to the brokers, because the brokers are critical to the success of any of these projects. They have to buy in to the idea that the developer is actually going to not only build a project, but that's going to be there 5, 10, 20 years after the developer is long gone. So how do you think about selection of a brand and the sort of conjuring up of the right product and sort of building and services to offer to the market so that it has that staying power, so that you're not only mitigating the market risk in the way that the market perceives you, but you're mitigating the risk that for your next project, the first one was so successful and that even 5 years out, the buyers in those buildings think that you did a great job as a developer, that they clamor, you've built your own brand, they clamor to come into your next project. How do you think about the planning process?
I think that's super interesting because we actually do look at it for both an LP perspective, which are our investors, as well as a GP perspective of we want to make sure that we're working with the right brands to build the right relationships, but also make our end clients happy with the product that we're achieving. So in terms of going back to thinking about the brand, obviously there's brand premium, which we can talk about in a second, and then there's obviously a series of costs associated with that brand, which include obviously approvals processes, quality standards, rigidity, which depending on the types of brands, and the timing that can be slowed down through the approvals processes. We're constantly weighing this off between this from an LP perspective, which is basically how do we maximize our investor returns. In terms of thinking about the first part, which is the top line, that's the trickiest because the only one that can really tell you that is the person who thinks and has the vision of the investment. The brands can tell you what they think, everybody can tell you what they think, but at the end of the day, you have to have an idea for where the market is going and who are going to be the end buyers in that market. And if those end buyers, again, match up with that brand's profile and that location of the investment. On the side of the GP perspective, I think it is very, very important. We do constantly look at building relationships with, for me, I think it's very important when we work actively with Accor. I think one of the reasons we work with, and we're very happy with Accor as a partner specifically, which we work with in SLS, is I think it's important to have a brand that has enough solidity as a brand, but also as a operation, to give us the solidity of the services and the brand standards that the clients are going to want, but also enough flexibility in a market that's emerging like Madrid, where there's it's a very peculiar market, and it's not the only one in terms of, I say there's 3 components that are very peculiar in Madrid. One is the building sizes are very small, so coming up with creative solutions in order to give the quality you want without affecting the end buyer, and the pricing that you're going to be passing along to the end buyer, I think is one of them. I think from an HOA perspective, it's extremely complex. I think Laura, who's speaking in the previous panel, can vouch to this. It's a very complex market in that perspective, and it's also a market that's not accustomed. It's not an international market. It's a very provincial market. It's kind of in that phase of growing out of that provinciality, but in that phase of growing out of it, you don't want to spend too much time educating people. You want to find because it's too costly from a marketing perspective to do so. So you have to find that kind of balanced trade-off of entering at the right timing and using the right brands that can almost educate the market themselves, if that makes sense.
And Jean-Baptiste, I mean, to me, the owner benefits program, what the brand brings to the table, having a really solid partner on the brand side is so critical. How have you thought about this as it relates to the market proposition, not only to buyers, but also how you sell yourself to developer partners like Mitra?
Yeah, and I think to add to what Mitra was saying, and we've been hearing it on every panel, right? It all comes down to you need to do your homework. I think the brand needs to do his homework, but the developer needs to, understand what's going on in the market. What is the profile of the people you're selling to? Are they buying to live in? Are they buying to invest?
Yes.
Where are they coming from? Different nationalities have different preferences. This will translate into what amenities you deliver for them. And this will help you sell and get the premium that we're talking about. You would not be surprised that we have constantly argument with developers on unit sizes, unit mix. Yes. Some developers come to us, I want to do 90% studios. Well, sorry, it doesn't work, Right. Please do your homework, talk to the right consultant, understand who you're selling to. And I think to your point as well, in delivering this added value, we do a lot of work in trainings the brokers, because they need to be fully on board and understand fully what the brand stand about, what is the DNA. If a broker sells an SLS versus a Raffles, the way they talk about the brand, the way they dress, the way the sales office is set up, and we have input in all of this. So all the touch points with the customers, the potential buyers, this is your customer journey that will eventually translate into the price premium that we're talking about. So I think doing the homework is key, because a lot of times, I have owners calling me, I want to put a brand on this project. I say, why do you need a brand, to start with? And most of the time, the answers are wrong. They're not doing a branded resi for the right reasons.
That's right.
So I think it's really this fundamental is getting the data right. If you look, we had, there was a previous panel with talking about the Raffles London, the old War Office. They've been doing, 3 different studies with 3 different consultants to constantly understanding who are the London market is evolving, Yes. The people buying 3 years ago are not the same buying today, and they won't be the same 3 years down the road, right?
Yes.
So you need to constantly monitor and understand who you're selling it to, how you need to address them, what are they looking for, and how you have to, adapt your offering, the services, the amenities, to maximize your investment and mitigate your investment risk.
Yes. I always think it's important for the brand to have an element of flexibility, and brand standards oftentimes get in the way if they're treated as a corporate hard and fast rule, right? Because brand standards have to adapt to the local market, whether it's New York or Madrid or Miami. What sells in that market, the way that people live, their lifestyle, their demand for much larger floor plans than we might have in another market, or if it's a more transient market, the perfect pied-à-terre market, the floor plans might be smaller. And so thinking about how the brand integrates through that experience, which can be very different from development to development, is always very important. How do you view sort of Accor's approach to sort of luxury standards that they always have to be site-specific?
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's what the market needs,
Yes.
right? You might not want to do a wine cellar approach in Saudi Arabia, for instance, but in Spain, if you have a really bespoke wine cellar where all the private owners can put the most fine wines, and then we bring one of the best sommelier for our neighboring hotel, and you organize, one of those wine tasting at the residence lounge. That's those experiences. This is what eventually they buy into. They buy into the lifestyle, as we've said again and again. The difference between a residence and a branded resi, it's about the lifestyle that you're selling and your experiences and the amenities. So again, we need to do our homework. The brand, first of all, need to understand the market. A lot of times, we're talking about brands. We are here, we live, we understand what's going on in Dubai or Miami. But some of the brands, they're not here, they don't understand what's going on. So it's very important that, in the equation is the brand and the developer, that both sides of the equation have done their homework and understand, what is needed. But there's a lot of things, we talk to our oftentimes you would see branded residences where you would see hotels around it, right? I mean, we're doing Fairmont residences in downtown Dubai. We have 2 Fairmont hotels not very far away. So you kind of understand already the profile of people visiting this area. So we get good data from that. And then, talking to brokers is one way as well to understanding what amenities you can create. And it's all about personalization. One of the success factors as well is this concierge service that we have. You go home in the evening, they welcome you back. We have your yoga session scheduled for tomorrow 9 a.m. Your kid came back from school on time. By the way, the pet has been out. We have also these services when you go on holiday, and I think somebody talked about it, while you are away. So we take care of watering your plant, making sure the AC is working well in Dubai in August when it's 200% humidity. Etc. So all those services, have to be adapted depending on the proposition you want to sell.
Right. And really only a hospitality brand can deliver on all of those services that you described, and that appeals to a certain type of buyer, whereas a fashion brand might appeal to a completely different type of buyer that doesn't necessarily want to feel that they're living in a hotel with all of those support services. There's a balance there, perhaps. I'm having a conversation right now with one of Accor's competitors on a super luxury project in an emerging market where the market is very ripe for development, but not so much of it has happened. Everything that's been built has been very large, and of course, the developer wants to achieve much higher prices per square foot, per square meter than have ever been achieved before in the market, yet the brand wants to adhere to brand standards that would make the chunk prices of the residential units astronomically expensive. And so there's this negotiation that's involved that you really have to, especially if the negotiation results, if the brand is so desirable to have at the table and is maintaining a perspective on large, gracious units where it puts a lot of pressure on price and depth of market, you really have to come through with those valuable services that really help to make the magic. One of the questions I have actually for Rosa is, how did you come up with your unit mix at the Armani here in Dubai?
So actually, the Armani has the largest units. I think our starting size is 256 square meters for a 2-bedroom, and it goes all the way to 400 square meters for the penthouse plus outdoor spaces, so they're massive. Starting price, I think, is 26 million. So what we generally do, we have an in-house research team which sits under business development. We analyze the market. We look at all of the sizes that are moving faster. We measure the absorption rates and look at the square foot and basically bracket the ticket prices. So that's demand side, and then we do a cost plus. So we look at our cost and then add on, and then finally add our profit margin at the end. And it's funny you mentioned this, because as we were working on the Armani project, we gradually see our feasibility basically increase the cost. The hard cost went from, it almost doubled through the design phase, and then also your efficiency reduces because they use, compared to a standard residential project, they use a lot more spaces for amenities. So a standard residential project in Dubai would be around 60% sellable to BUA. In the case of a branded residence, it usually is around 50 to 51%. So when people talk about price premiums, you always have to keep in mind that it has to increase by at least 40% for it to be a more profitable project compared to a standard residential project. In fact, we have some examples of branded residences in an emerging market, which is Sharjah, where we have more profitable projects which are not branded, even though the branded projects achieve the highest rates in that market. So achieving that equation and making sure that it all stacks up takes a little bit of time, and as both Mitra and Jean-Baptiste said, it's a constant exercise of reviewing the feasibility, looking at the costs, and understanding how it's impacting your profitability.
That's right. I heard some commentary that I thought was really great, actually, in a prior panel related to the cost of the brand and the cost burden on the association to have a brand involved, not only from the brand licensing fees, because that's just a deduction from sale proceeds. It's really about the ongoing proposition to the buyers, and it's really critical to get that right, to have it be marketable. I think a comment, and I say this all the time, actually, even rich people, somebody else said this comment, and I thought it was almost direct quote of something I always say, which is even rich people care about what it costs to own a second home. And so really focusing in on how those amenities and services truly add value rather than just offering fluff is so important. There's a concept that I talk about a lot called the brand stack, and I've seen this play out in a few projects really well, and I'm always mindful of it when I'm working on new developments, which is that sometimes it's not really enough to just have a brand. It might make sense to have multiple brands in projects, and especially in Europe, Mitra, where there might be an adaptive reuse of an old building. The building might have its own history and heritage, and that's an element of the brand stack. You might have a well-known architect involved in a project like Tado Ando paired with Armani. You might have, for example, what I think is really one of the best examples that I've seen in Miami, the Surf Club, which is Four Seasons, but nobody calls it the Four Seasons. They call it the Surf Club. And so there you have this overarching brand called the Surf Club, where Four Seasons is the hospitality partner, You have Thomas Keller as the culinary partner and architecture partners, and so the way that these stack together to create this impression of value that's multifaceted is really important. So I'd love to hear, Jean-Baptiste, how do you think about, how have you partnered with other brands to sort of accentuate in a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of model what you all bring to the table as the hospitality brand?
Yeah, I think we would be open to, and we've seen, some of those fashion brands talking to us because they see now the market is getting educated, and people are asking, okay, it's sold, who is actually going to operate and deliver what you've promised? And obviously, some of those brands, they don't have the experience. We've been doing this for 20 years plus, right? So I think you could see a model, a scenario with the best of both worlds, where you have, the fashion brand or the automotive brand. We, for instance, one of our collection brand, whereas it be Ghamsari or Emblems Collection, has a soft, element, but it's an Accor management, very much so. So you get the premium on your sales price because it's the big fashion or whatever automotive brand, but at the same time, the buyers are really comfortable with it because they know Accor is behind it, is going to deliver the experience and the amenities that were promised. So we're totally open to that.
Yeah.
But it's not a model that we've seen yet being created, so yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to do with a small project also. I think your pairing with Tatuando and Armani was really inspired. Tatuando actually, as his own brand, had an incredibly successful project in New York City, 152 Elizabeth Street. One of the most beautiful developments I've ever seen. I'd encourage you to take a look at it if you're ever in New York. And he was the essence of the brand, and it was such a refined project. There were only 14 units. But there was a buyer from one of the most prestigious buildings on Central Park that actually bought the penthouse in this Chinatown development, a completely different Lower East Side location. So the power of the brand can really add something to this, especially when paired with a service mentality. I think private restaurants is another topic as it relates to this layering in of the brand stack. And sometimes they're very difficult to maintain. I'm familiar with projects where the private restaurant, after the developer was gone, devolved into a situation where the building staff would get takeout from a neighboring restaurant and then plate it in the residential lounge because that's all they could afford to do. That's all the condo association chose to fund. And of course, it puts the brand association with the project at risk when you do that. But culinary propositions can be very, very expensive, and so the sustainability of this is critical to think about. It's an easy thing to market, an element like a standalone restaurant, but if it's operated by the condo association, it's very difficult to make that sustainable. And so leasing mechanisms sometimes are the most appropriate approach. Have you worked on any projects that have included restaurants?
Yes, and I think the key here is creating flexible spaces, right?
Yes.
So you want to have this, because you're talking a project 20, 30 years down the line,
Yes.
right? So people will live there, and we need to be able to deliver the same promise 20 years down, right? So I think the idea is to being smart about those spaces, because they will have an impact on service charge, and we want this to remain sustainable and successful. So the benefit of working with hospitality brand is, for instance, for us, we have 80 or so hotels in Dubai. Yes. We can easily bring a chef from, our Raffles, our Fairmont, etc., deliver on those experiences on an ad hoc basis, bringing an artist, that's staying at Sofitel or whatever, and creating a really bespoke evening for our homeowners or something like this. So that's easier for brands like us because we have those facilities around us where we can just plug those elements. And it works both ways because we could invite our owners having, is their anniversary or their kid's birthday, and do something in one of our hotels, through the concierge service. Right. So it works both ways, right? And I've heard it earlier. There's somebody who was talking about, why you're buying this Raffles residence in London? Because I'm going to the Seychelles Raffles and the Maldives and and so on. And they know me, they know what I want, and that's the idea, right? Yeah. We know them very well. We know what they like, and we can ensure that their experiences throughout our network is seamless, and we deliver on their preferences and creating those really unique bespoke services.
I think it helps when you have a standalone project built in the same market where you have an existing hotel, because you have that backbone of built-in service and management that allows for even pop-up activations that don't cost the developer or the condominium association very much money, because they're not dedicating space to
à la carte,
constantly,
right?
and it makes it a lot easier. Mitra, how have you thought about sort of mitigating this risk that we're talking about here in a standalone project, this ongoing proposition of the developer promise that actually is sustainable? Your projects tend to be in smaller buildings, but as you grow, of course, there's really still an untapped market in the markets that you're focused on. How are you thinking about growing this with, granted, more burdensome to operate buildings while still mitigating that developer risk?
I think going back to what we were talking about, the brand and creating a brand, I think one of the things we're focusing on as a developer is we are actually branding the individual buildings, because a lot of our buildings are emblematic. Madrid has a very, it's a very listed city with very specific, we almost basically own palaces, to be honest, given the brands that we're working with, and they all have their own personality. But we also, as a developer, have a personality, and that's what we're really focusing on to kind of grow our personality and our developer presence from the stacking perspective, because I think it's a little bit more tricky with two external brands where you have fees on fees on fees on fees in terms of the numbers, basically.
Yes.
In answer to your previous question, I think the opportunity for an emerging market, going back just on one thing I wanted to mention about the unit sizes and the unit mix, I think it's much easier in a market like Dubai where there's a lot of market data. When you get into these emerging markets, you have very little data.
Yes.
And you have to have a very strong vision, but you have to be able to act very quickly and be able to be flexible. So that goes back to having a good relationship with the brand and a flexible relationship with the brand to be able to react. And also in terms of our aspects of unit sizing, which is also very different from here, is that we have very protected buildings in terms of listing and what we can do with them. So it's coming up with creative solutions that allow for modularity and flexibility, I think, is very important as well, to not get burned from a growth perspective.
For sure.
In terms of going back to your question, yes, our plan is obviously we've started in a market that's emerging. I like working in emerging markets because I think there's more upside. You also obviously have a lot more downside, but as long as you're covering your downsides with flexible solutions, our plan is to expand outside of Spain in this upcoming year.
It's fantastic. We're really at the end of the time here, but we have a few more minutes, I think, for questions and answers. I'd like to ask Rosa before we do that, though. You're in the same boat. You're expanding very quickly in terms of other markets outside of Dubai, looking for new development opportunities. How are you thinking about evolving what Arada is doing and your own sort of personal brand on the type of development that you're pursuing?
Sure. So we like the branded residences concept. I think it's very unique, and there's segments of the market that respond very well to it. So of course, Dubai is a market that loves service and loves brands, so it's easier to do it in Dubai. We're building that in Sharjah. We did 3 branded residences scheme in Sharjah, and the first one will be delivered in 1 year, which is Vida. Once that comes to life, I think people will be able to understand what the value of a branded residence actually is. We have plots in Australia, which are going to do standard residential. And I think when you look at branded residences, you need to be very mindful of what plot of land you have or what building you have, because, for example, a 5-star brand will work only in a 5-star location. A 4-star brand can work in a 5-star location, but it needs to be studied carefully. And going back to the feasibility, in developed markets like Australia, Sydney, where we are currently developing in, the cost of the land is about 50% of your project cost. In places like UAE, it's about 20%. So you have to be very careful and be sure that in that location, that brand can achieve the price premium to cover your costs and make you and turn your profit. But if we look at usually the way we do it, once we have a plot of land, we understand the market and we look at what brand partnership can be a good connection with that plot. One thing that I think wasn't mentioned is, for us, because Arada has a strong brand, our own brand, we wouldn't work with a brand that we don't feel aligns with our brand values and our brand ethos. So, for example, Armani is perfect for us because they're very minimalistic. W is a little bit more eclectic, but still they have a very modern design. We wouldn't go for a brand that is a bit more traditional, for example. Yeah.
That's great. And final thoughts, Jean-Baptiste, as Accor thinks about, at the luxury level, evolving this standalone element in our world. What do you think's next here for the Accor luxury brands, for standalone projects specifically?
Well, we've been growing a lot. I mean, we see a lot of traction for branded resi. Oh, I lost. Okay, I'm here. Is markets that are very maturing, right? I mean, I have 4 Sofitel in Dubai. I have 2 Raffles. It's one of the few cities in the world where we have 2 Raffles. So really, for us to grow, branded residences is really the one of the driver. But again, it needs to be very carefully done and with the right people.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think we have a couple of minutes. We'll take a couple of minutes for any Q&A. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for the panel? Wonderful. I think we have a microphone here coming for you, sir.
Hi. Yeah. So this is for you, Jean-Baptiste. I know you represent luxury, but from an Accor point of view, you have hotels which are franchise and you have hotels which are managed. Will you do a franchise branded residences?
Yes, yes, we would do on case-to-case basis, depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the developer as well, and how we can ensure to protect the experience, the standards. So it's on case-to-case basis, most likely not for luxury, but for our premium, and we do branded resi for mid-scales as well. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, who can get the microphone?
No, not Scott.
Jean-Baptiste, the reality is...
There's 3 of us here.
The reality is you're doing franchise on your branded residence right now through the structure. Because the building manager hires back, the developer hires the building manager who then turns around and rehires the developer who then hires you to supervise, direct, and control the facilities that are run by the developer. So it's really franchise already.
Yeah, but the key word is we supervise them still, right?
Which, yeah, but arguably...
So we are
do that through
involved.
the franchise.
We are still involved. But yes, optically.
But my question is, with the standalone, you're offering all these amenities, and you see some of the standalones here, they've got a designer, chef, and restaurant. But if those don't work out, who pays for it? The residents, that goes to their service charge. So how do you manage that, providing all these glam things and make them work? Because the reality, a person who lives there all the time is less likely to use the spa, is less likely to use that restaurant as much as if it was a hotel where you're treating yourself.
I think it comes back to doing your homework, Scott, and building in flexibility in the spaces so that you don't overload the service charge, and you minimize I mean, somebody said, you know, the bulk of the service charge is people, it's staff, right? So you want to have amenities that allows us to deliver the brand promise, but at the same time are not a burden on the service charge and the homeowners. And so for this, you need to do your homework, understand where the market is going, getting the right data, and I think that's the only way to do it. So yeah, flexibility in the spaces and doing your homework to mitigate the risk.
Okay, a follow-on question from Scott's actually. What lessons can you share when you've got amenities that don't work?
I think I don't have a lot of experience on that, but in my opinion, you could repurpose some of the space. You could lease it out. Co-working is a new thing that did not exist maybe 10 years ago. Maybe you can repurpose some of your lobby experience into co-working and actually make revenue from this. So I think repurposing, I think the homeowner association would be okay to do that.
Are there any examples in certain markets where you've put amenities in that just didn't work for whatever reason? And you had to repurpose them?
There's a project in New York that has, so private restaurants are like a real flashpoint because, of course, developers love to sell the idea that even if they don't have a hotel, they have a very exclusive private restaurant with a named chef. Those typically don't work because of the fact that any building in a market where it's loaded up with secondary homeowners at the very highest levels, is occupied maybe 30% at any given point in time. And so what I've seen happening in a couple of projects in New York at this point that have very expensive private restaurants is they're actually selling it as an event space. And the condominium association has come to terms with the idea that the public is going to come in a very select basis because they're funding through private dining experiences and private events, the use of that restaurant that subsidizes its operation and keeps it live as an element that the residents still enjoy, but from time to time it's sold out. And that's one solution, but it's very difficult to come up with replacement uses sometimes without a significant capital expenditure. Maybe just one more question before we go.
Sorry, I had my turn, but speaking about that, we were just visiting New York, the whole Accor One Living team, early September, and we visited quite a few other key major brand, luxury brands. And one of the standalone residences had that exact concept, like a restaurant on one of the best floors, fantastic views, totally empty. And when we asked whether they thought that was going to survive, the answer was pretty much they did not think so. And so either they would repurpose it, like you mentioned, except that they didn't have that many residences in that project, so having people troop through was not a great idea. So I think long term, the lady mentioned to me that they might even just convert it to a room, to an apartment, and just, it's a common space that basically when they sell it, the money goes into the reserve.
Can I just add on? In our cases, for example, in our projects, we've built everything and designed everything that they can be open for public. So the restaurants can actually, in our case, in our money, we have a really nice restaurant and it's going to be open for public most likely. Same with the spa, because there are people that want to visit these beautiful buildings, and by opening it up to the public, it helps both decrease your service charge, so the homeowners will also be happy, and it keeps it lively because you don't want to go to a building and there's no one, it's completely dead.
I think I know the building you're talking about in New York, and always what's key to some degree is what control does the condominium association have versus the developer, especially if it's a sort of a newly built, delivered to the condo board project. The developer may, in fact, own that as a retail condominium, and then there may be, the flexibility or lack thereof for the association to do anything about it, and so. Depends on how the condo docs are set up, et cetera. But that's always something actually that buyers should be looking into when they're looking at these amenities and the sustainability of that. If it goes south, to your point, then what is the developer's obligation? What is the developer control? Because the association may be in a bind then. If the developer says, all right, fine, the restaurant didn't work, I'm going to put in a co-working lounge in there because I think that's going to be the right solution from a revenue standpoint. But of course, the legal documentation is so critical in these projects. This is a fascinating discussion. We've gone way over, though, but we're all here and encourage you to come and speak with us individually. But thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.